Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Ask an Expert Corporate Inclusivity. Please be advised that we will be recording the session, so we want to let attendees know that if you have any questions, you can ask in the chat function, and it will also be recorded. My name is Virginia Barlow, my pronouns are she, her, and I am the Digital Transformation Specialist with the Henry Burdick Entrepreneurship Center. I will be your moderator for today's session. The Planning Committee and the Ask the Expert series is led by the County of Simcoe. Over the last 2 years, we have been able to bring organizations throughout the county some excellent content as you navigate the current environment. I encourage you to keep an eye out for future webinars. We have a lot of great content coming your way very soon. Also, a great thank you to our regional partners who have assisted us with these webinars: the Small Business Center of Barrie, Simcoe County, and Orillia, South Georgian Bay Small Business Enterprise Center, Orillia Area CDC, Nottawasaga Futures, North Simcoe Community Futures Development Corporation, Community Futures South Georgian Bay, the Sandbox Center, and Georgian College. Prior to today, several of you shared questions with us. These were provided to our guest expert, and many of the responses have been incorporated into this presentation. However, we are also hoping to have an opportunity for questions during the end of the session. If you have questions during the presentations, please type them into the chat function, and you will find that chat button at the bottom of your screen. We'll address as many of the questions as we can find at the end of the presentation. It is my pleasure to have the opportunity to facilitate today's session. A little bit about our presentations. I'm a little nervous this morning. A little bit about our presenters. Monica Annell is Get Real's content manager and lead speaker. She is a media communications graduate from the University of Guelph and Humber and has brought her multifaceted experience to Get Real. Born in Colombia and raised in Canada, Monica embraces all parts of her identity and wants the youth to do the same. Her passion for human beings, hearing their stories, their experiences, their struggles, and their triumphs gives her the drive to continue to create and amplify content that highlights the voices we don't hear every day. In her downtime, she loves to hang out with her family and friends, rollerblade, and play basketball, watch sunsets, travel, and dance in her living room. I like that. Jonas has been a Get Real speaker since graduating his year of high school, inspired by seeing a Get Real workshop when he was a student himself. Jonas joined Get Real as its youngest facilitator. His work ethic and skill as a public speaker and ability to relate to audiences all across Canada has led him to being a leader within the organization, speaking to tens of thousands of youth in BC, Manitoba, Ontario, and Nova Scotia over the years. Born and raised in Toronto, Jonas is passionate about mental health and physical health within the trans community and overall young queer folk as a whole. As a trans man, Jonas is passionate about being a speaker because he believes that everyone deserves to feel valid and accepted, no matter how they express themselves. Passionate about systemic inequalities, Jonas is working to complete his undergraduate degree in politics and public policy. I will hand it over to our presenters.
Whoa, Virginia, that was the best introduction I think we've ever received. And I am not just saying that. Thank you so much for that. I feel like maybe Jonas and we don't even have to introduce ourselves anymore because you did such a fantastic job.
That's like really the most solid introduction we've ever had, for sure.
Whoa, in depth. I love it. So here I am sharing my screen with all of you. You can definitely see a big portion of our team, but this is not everyone because since this photo, we have had new speakers come on and our team has definitely grown, but this is pretty much everybody. So we are the Get Real movement, and we are a non-for-profit organization that works in high schools, universities, and workplaces all across Canada. And our big thing is building compassion and acceptance through through sharing stories. We believe that everybody has a story, and the more that we start to open up and also listen to the stories of other people, the more connected we will be, and the easier it will be to put ourselves in the shoes of other people and come to that place of understanding and support. So like you heard in the introduction there, Jonas and I are going to be speaking today about inclusivity. We are going to be having grateful versus challenging activity in the middle of the workshop, and also a Q&A section where you can use the Google Forms that we have shared with all of you as well. And with that all being said, we are going to start off today with a land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, and Haudenosaunee, and Anishinaabe, and this stolen land is home to many diverse First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people across Turtle Island. The land, as we speakers are, is covered by the Dish with One Spoon, Wampum Belt Covenant, and the Williams Treaty. We're coming to this workshop from across the land and encourage you all to learn the history of the land on which you work and live on. So today and every day, we use this land acknowledgement to honor our own relationship to the earth and show our respect for the Two-Spirit and Indigenous people who have contributed to this learning and whose voices are erased and overlooked and ignored. So we definitely love to take that moment, of course, to do the land acknowledgement, because we are here today because of the history and the present history of our Indigenous folks and communities that we have. So it's definitely an honor to be here with all of you today, and we want to go through some group guidelines. Today we are here to learn, and we are coming to this workshop with so many perspectives, and we want to make sure that we are all coming here in a respectful and place to listen to one another, while also just trying to be open to ourselves, opening our hearts and opening our minds. We love when people get curious. I know Jonas and I are curious human beings as well, so we definitely encourage questions and for you to be vulnerable, and to lean into any discomfort that you may feel, because this workshop is definitely about learning some things that we grew up learning, and learning new things that will allow us to be more inclusive and allow for a more diverse and welcoming community in our workplaces. And then lastly here, of course, take care of your safety, protect your energy. If you need to step out, turn your camera off, etc. Of course, if you need to reach out for support during or after the workshop, please do it as you feel needed. Going through the agenda for today, we're going to do, of course, we've already done introductions. We're going to get into the why we do workshops like this today, and then identities, and we're going to stories. Jonas and I will have an opportunity to share with you a little bit more. I know you've heard quite a bit now about ourselves, but we'll go a little bit more in depth, and we'll have that reflection activity that I talked about. We'll talk about identities and assumptions and terminology, and then give you a little bit of an introduction to the 2S LGBTQ+ community, how to be allies, and how to take action beyond just the wording. And then we'll go into scenarios, and then the ability to answer some of the questions that you may have that developed throughout the workshop, or things that maybe you just want to know that you never had a chance to ask somebody. So quickly, we'll go into the introductions.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonas. I use the pronouns he and him. I think the pronoun part was the only part that is not an introduction of me that wasn't already said. So it was definitely really diligent. So I won't add too much in the interest of time, but really just want to thank everyone for being here, for having us. I'm very excited to be here. I love speaking with Monica, especially on a corporate level, because then at that same time we get to collectively come together. We get to have ideas, discussion. It's a little bit more open than working with students. So I'm really excited to be here and excited to get to know all of you a little bit better as well.
Amazing. Hi, everyone. My name is Monica. My pronouns are she, her. Yep, you already know quite a bit about me and why I'm a part of the Get Real movement. I was a flight attendant before being a speaker with Get Real, and it was definitely amazing to be able to meet so many different people around the world. And I'm very excited to be able to continue doing that, even if it is virtually, because I love just connecting with other human beings. So let's get started speaking about meeting people from all over the world. Let's get into why we're doing this and why diversity is important and what it means. So diversity is the inclusion of different voices and perspectives, and it's important in a workplace because when we don't include these different ideas, audiences, and thoughts, we are definitely missing on a lot of value. And this goes beyond the 2S LGBTQ plus community. It really includes people of different intersectionalities, which we'll be learning more about later on as well. But we've definitely realized that it's not just enough about having these voices present. Like, oh, we have a very diverse community in our work, and that's it. We're good. No, it's not like that, right? It's about taking a look into the systemic barriers and internal changes to make the difference. It's not always going to be comfortable, but the fact that you are all here today really shows that you're already committed to doing some learning. So this illustration here is a great starting point to have a better understanding of what we need to focus on. And that's the actuality that we need to fight for more than just having diversity in the workplace. And ultimately, we're reaching this last image here, which we have justice. So let's get started with inequality. This is about having an unbalanced access to opportunities. As you can see here, the apples aren't really falling for the two people at the same capacity, even though they are both standing under one single tree. So what people have been striving for is equality. And the solution has been to be fair, right? Give everyone a ladder so that they can both have access to the apples easier. And now they're both equal, right? But that's where we see it here, that there's still a problem. There's still so many more apples growing on the other side of the tree than the other. So this is where equity comes into play, where we identify what the problem is and where we give people the tools. So we say, we need to give this person a bigger ladder so that we can fix the inequality. But the last image here is justice. It looks at the root of the problem. And we see that it wasn't just about the tools that we needed to give people, but the system producing the injustice. So here in this analogy, it's, the tilt in the tree that always gave the other person the more apples. Here we're exposing those systemic barriers and rectifying them, such as fixing the tree, having equal access to both tools and opportunity. And that's where justice is truly found. And this workshop is a step towards that direction. And hopefully we'll start, or maybe continue for some of you, reflection to more self-awareness, to actively listen to those voices and to make change to achieve that final justice.
Beautiful. So like Monica mentioned earlier, we are going to be sharing a little bit about our own experiences, just how we got to the program, how we came to be, in this position. And what we find is helpful is running through a little bit of intro to identity. So it's going to help make our stories make more sense. There might be some terms and phrases that are, unfamiliar to some, maybe not to others. But just so we're on the same page, we're going to run through this beautiful gender unicorn slide, which we use for every group of individuals that we run this workshop for. It is really informative, but it's also helps that it's super cute too. So we're going to go through these categories, but if there are any questions at all, please do not be afraid. We are going to get to those at the end of the workshop, hopefully, if there's time. So the first category would be your gender identity, how you feel about yourself, whether you feel like a girl, like a boy, maybe a combination of both, maybe neither. Your gender identity is very subjective to you and something that only you know about yourself. That second category is your gender expression. So how you might express that particular gender identity to the world. So are you more feminine? Are you more masculine? Combination of both, maybe neither. This can come into play in terms of how you interact with your peers, how you dress yourself. The pronouns that you use are a huge point of expression also. It's really important though to remember that our gender identity is on the inside, while that expression is seen more so on the outside. Third category there is your sex assigned at birth, which are just the body parts that you were born with. And then those bottom two, of course, are whom you're attracted to. So you'll see physically, emotionally, men, women, neither, or both. So lots of information all at once, but the real, points to take from this slide are number one, all of these categories are seen as a spectrum. So if we're looking at gender identity as an example, we have male on one side, female on the other. It's not just those two places that you can find yourself falling, but rather all of that fluidity in between is what represents the spectrum of gender identity. Second thing is that all of these categories operate independently or separately from each other. So using gender again, so how we feel about ourselves, our gender identity, it's not just based on our sex assigned at birth, so the body parts that we were born with, and how we choose to express our gender, whether we're more feminine, masculine, combination of both or neither, doesn't impact who we're allowed to be attracted to and who we're not allowed to be attracted to. So this helps make our stories make a little bit more sense, really helps map out identity versus expression versus sex assigned at birth. And also it might help you understand yourself a little bit better as well. So with all that being said, we are going to get into stories, but this slide here also just represents that there is a lot of drop down. Well, I like to call them a drop down menu. So if we have, sexual orientation, we have our trans and gendered identities, we're going to have a few things that fall underneath. Not to overwhelm everybody, because we don't need to know all of the words. We don't need to know all the details and intricacies, because a baseline for understanding these things is that we don't need to get something to respect it. So if there are words here, maybe some identities and terms that are new, that is not to worry at all, because we're all learning at that same pace, at the same capacity. So hopefully this helps set us up a little bit. But of course, if there are any questions, we'll get to it at the end.
Yes, 100%. Thank you so much, Jonas. It's definitely a great understanding that like every single one of us does have human identity, right? And we all have the way that we express ourselves. We all have, who we like, who we don't like. And, that does allow us to just open up our minds to be able to hear our stories a little bit more. And, we like to share that first, because then you can hear our stories and know that like, okay, some of you might be able to relate to some of the things that we are sharing here today, or some of you're just learning about somebody else and something new. So with all that being said, I'm going to start with my story first. So hi everyone, once again, my name is Monica and I am gay. And no, don't worry, that's not how I always introduce myself in public. I do with the students and of course with you are here today, because that part for me was never easy to say out loud or at all. There was a point in my life where I actually thought saying those words meant that I would no longer be able to have a relationship with God, that I would be letting my parents down, or that I had changed. It's definitely been a journey, but I'm proud to be sitting here in front of you all to share with you a little bit about my story. So I was born in Medellin, Colombia, and I immigrated to Canada as a refugee in 2000. And I grew up in a fairly religious household. In high school, I didn't know much about the LGBTQ plus community. There were a few people who had come out, but our school never really had resources. And the few times my family did talk about it, it was always something that happened to other families. I remember when I started my very first job at Wendy's, I used to get butterflies in my stomach, and I would have crushes on girls, but I would push all those feelings down because I thought, oh no, that doesn't happen to girls like me. What I mean by that is that I thought that I didn't fit the lesbian stereotype. The little representation that I did see on TV, they always looked different than I did. So I would always try to convince myself that I wasn't a lesbian because I didn't look like a lesbian. Other messaging that I also got from the TV and from the people around me was that if I ever told anybody about the way that I was feeling, that they were going to be disappointed in me, that they weren't going to accept me, and that it was going to add difficulty to my life. So I remember thinking to myself, whoa, I am never going to tell my parents. I don't want to add to their already difficult life. So I just pushed all those feelings down. I used to pray to God to take away the thoughts. I would look in the mirror and I would try to, say like, I'm not gay, I'm not gay. But eventually I realized that by pushing all those feelings down and by doing that, that wasn't going to do anything. And I was truly just hurting myself. I felt disconnected from God. I couldn't really talk to my parents. I felt insecure, and I was becoming a person that I didn't enjoy being anymore. And then in university, I started my very next job. Oop, I went ahead. I started my first job and my next job, sorry. And I met a person, a coworker that made me feel so special and so comfortable because I saw and I heard his inclusive language. I saw how accepting and how loving he was towards other people. And so one day I swallowed all those fears that I had built up over the years and I came out to him. So I told him, I'm gay. He listened. He told me everything was going to be okay and that nothing had changed. His support right there and those words that he said to me allowed me the strength to be able to come out to other people. And so a few months later, I decided to start coming out to my other friends and then my brothers. And then came the time when I decided to tell my parents. With my whole body shaking and the words barely coming out of my mouth, I did it. To my relief, my dad said that as long as I was a good person and that I strived to work hard, that it didn't matter who I loved. My mom, however, she questioned me and felt awkward about it, but someone told me something very important during that time that I will never forget. They said, your parents need to go through a similar process that you did, so give them time. I realized that I couldn't force my mom to be okay with my coming out right away when I wasn't okay with it either at the very beginning. But now, after a few years, a lot of conversations and a lot of communication, I definitely feel my mom's support 100%. And finally, the last relationship that I was nervous about was with God. At first I did find myself going to church less because I felt like I didn't belong. But over time, I started to talk to God more one-on-one. And I saw that I can still identify as gay and believe in God. So now I no longer feel like I have to push one side of myself just to be another. Instead, I can celebrate all of the things that make me me. So if you can take away two things from my story, it's that one, not everybody who's gay looks a certain way. People of the 2S LGBTQ plus community come from all walks of life, and you are probably working with people of the community. We all have different paths. We all come from different cultures, different beliefs, colors, shapes, and sizes, and not everybody fits all the stereotypes that we may have in our minds. So, we have to make sure that we respect one another, no matter what. And two is that if a family member or even a stranger or a coworker comes out to you, make sure that you support them because you can be that one person that really changes their life and allows them to accept themselves, just like my coworker did for me. So my name is Monica. Yes, I am gay, but I'm also Latina. I'm an immigrant. I'm a believer of God. I love to play basketball. Oh, there's just people racing outside my door. I love to play basketball. I love to dance. I'm a daughter. I'm a friend. All of these things and so many more make up who I am, not just that one single thing that I mentioned at the beginning. So thank you all so much for allowing us to share our stories here with you today and for giving us the space to be our authentic selves.
Amazing. Thank you, Monica. I've been working with Mon for a while now, running workshops, whether that be with students or with corporate partners. And I'm blown away every single time because I imagine how my experiences would have been different if I heard it as a student. But even at any age is equally as impactful. So thank you so much, Mon. I am going to share a few things about myself as well. So just outside of the program, I have a really big family. That's what I love to start with. Lots of siblings. So I grew up one of 6 and lots of chaos, lots of love in my house. But it was definitely never quiet. We're now all in our 20s and 30s and only a year or two apart. So we're really close. I'm a huge music listener. So that's usually the first thing that I do in the morning. I'll just roll over, put my earphones in, like to start my day that way. I've been working alongside Get Real for a number of years, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. It's something that I can't really see myself deviating from for some time, just because of how lovely it is to work with students and with all of you as well. But with all that being said, as it was mentioned in my introduction, I also do identify with being transgender. And the reason why I choose to share that last when I introduce myself is because it is a part of who I am, but doesn't make me entirely who I am. So I'm going to get into a little bit about me today. So I was born and assigned female at birth, and my mom was really, really excited because before I was born, she had two boys. So she finally had the opportunity to buy all these pink, flowery, frilly dresses and skirts. Again, she was really excited to have her firstborn daughter. I didn't blame her at all, looking back, just because everything in the 90s was exceptionally gendered anyway. So again, wanted to celebrate her being excited. But as I started to get older, you can tell my expression started to change a little bit. So in this next picture, you'll see me in probably grade 5, I would think. I'm on the left side there. We really just pull these photos out for all of your viewing pleasure, because otherwise these pictures wouldn't really see the light of day. Early 2000s was a rough time for sure, but this is how I chose to express myself, and not deliberately, but more so in an organic way. So when I got ready for my day, I didn't think about things in a gendered fashion, whether that was clothes, activities, sports, interactions. I never thought about it that way at all. I was just being a young, happy, healthy kid. And I didn't realize that how I chose to express myself was so unique until my peers started asking me questions. And then what happened was that those questions ended up spiraling into bullying. So the bullying that I experienced in schools, it was pretty brutal. It was on a day-to-day basis. We had parents and teachers and principals from other schools get involved. And it actually did get to the point where the police got involved. So that was due to the physical extent of what I experienced, just out of safety for me. It was just a little bit of a better decision at that time. So being at school, really, really tough. I didn't have a lot of support. A lot of the discrimination was coming from staff in the school as well. There was not a lot of education, a lot of policies surrounding queer youth. And I was the only queer kid that I knew for miles. So definitely challenging, but my at-home life was a little bit tougher. And the reason being is that I grew up in a single parent family. And of course, I had a lot of siblings, but which meant I had to share. Of course, I had to share my mom a lot. But what had happened is that my mom ended up getting pretty sick. And by the time I got to grade 8, she had been diagnosed with cancer. So my mom made a lot of sacrifices. She worked really hard to make sure we had everything we needed. And at that point, she, really, really, really was challenged by that diagnosis, and our whole family was too. So that really exacerbated all my experiences at school, and really made me think, okay, going into high school, I really want to fit in. I don't want to be bullied anymore. I just want life to be easy. So that's what I did. People kept telling me I was a girl, so I thought maybe I'll run with it. So this is me in grade 9, so I guess 13 or 14. And whenever I look at a photo like this, the first thing that comes to my mind is how difficult it is to pretend to be a person that you're not. So the person that's speaking to you today, right now, has always been in there, really fighting really hard to be seen. But when your outsides don't match your insides, it's a feeling that is exceptionally difficult to express if the other person doesn't feel it either. Because it's not tangible. It's not something that you can really feel unless you feel it. So with that being said, I started to feel a lot of pressure. My mental health was starting to be a little bit in question, because at the time, I did not know if it was normal to question your gender. So I opened up to a teacher, and how the teacher responded absolutely changed everything for me. She set up a workshop very similarly to the one that we're all in right now. And that was the day that I met a trans person for the first time in my life, which taught me two things. First thing is that there's actually a massive, massive community of people out there who are exactly like me, leading to my second point in that for the first time in my whole life, I actually was not alone. So by the time I got to grade 12, I ended up coming out as Jonas. I cut my hair, I changed my name, my gender marker. I started testosterone injections. I started working with Get Real, more full-time capacity, meeting amazing co-speakers like Monica, tens and thousands of amazing students across Canada, and amazing folks like yourselves as well. And it's all of these working parts that have helped me understand that working with, queer folks and queer youth especially is really something that I'm passionate about because of my experiences growing up. I'm really proud to be a part of it. And I oftentimes tell students that it's something that they should be exceptionally proud of as well. Because I know in the future, let's say when I'm ready to have my own family, I know my kids will have so much better of an experience in schools than I did. So I guess if there's one thing to take from my experiences, It would be to make your workplace or whatever space that you're taking up as positive, open, and inclusive as possible on the basis that we don't know what people are going home to. We are going to do an activity that highlights it a little bit better. But the reason I share that is because I had an incredible experience in first year university. One of my biggest bullies growing up, a kid who got expelled, got suspended from every school, got arrested a couple of times. He actually came up to me in my first year of university and he apologized. He was like, if I had any clue that you were going through, any of that at home, I would not have made it worse by putting you through what I did at school. And I really mean that. And so for me, that's what showed me that you can make that active choice to respect somebody, even if you don't quite understand what it is they're going through. So that's just a little bit about me. I want to say a big thank you to all of you for, giving Monica and I the room and the space to be ourselves. The way this workshop was set up, the way we were introduced, makes it that much easier for me to be myself. So a big, warm thank you to all of you, and really hope to get to know you better through the activity.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jonas. Yeah, it's definitely such like a key thing to take away. It's that, we don't choose who we are. Like, we are the people that we are, and that's it. But we can all choose the language and the environment that we build for other people to feel that inclusiveness. So we do have a choice in those words. And so thank you so much, Jonas. Yeah, definitely so nice to be able to hear your story and be able to know that, like, yes, we are such different human beings, and I get to celebrate you for being different from myself. But then I also, when I get a moment to really listen to your story and kind of get to know you a little bit deeper, then I can see that we're not as different as we really thought we were. And so we're going to go into a video that we created back in 2019 for National Coming Out Day, called To My Grade 7 Self. You can definitely hear in our stories how inclusivity and fighting for anti-oppression means a lot to us personally. And so this video right here is just a reflection from our friends and connections to the Get Real family, and we hope that you enjoy it.
Dear grade 7 Lauren, there is so much I want to tell you.
Yeah, so I know grade 7 is a tough time for you right now.
It's going to be a lot of heartache, and your body's going to change in ways that you really, really don't like.
Dear grade 7 Jem,
I know what you're feeling deep down, and I know that it keeps you up at night.
if I could travel back in time, I'd see a scared, confused, lonely, and misunderstood young man.
I know the kids sometimes say you dress different, you don't have that much money, and you lack so much self-confidence.
You'll feel like you're worthless. You'll feel abandoned.
Every interaction you have with your friends, you overthink it. You think, was I too gay?
Dear grade 7 Kristen, you only tell a few of your closest college friends, and you kind of live two separate lives. I know that right now you're probably starting to feel a little bit different.
I know right now you're feeling like
If you tell people who you really are, if you tell people that you're a girl,
nobody's gonna take you seriously.
You are gonna be outed, and it's gonna be on a public forum, on social media, and on TV.
You'll feel hurt. You'll hurt yourself, and you'll hurt others.
You're gonna feel scared. You're gonna feel like someone punched you in the stomach, and you can't gasp for air.
Go easy on your relationship with your mom. It's all new to her, and she needs some time to process it too. Your relationship will be perfect, and she will still be everything to you.
Dear grade 7 Harrison, yes, that's your name now.
If you're worried about what other people are gonna think when they find out you're gay,
And I promise that one day you will no longer have to feel like the way you do now.
no one cares. It's your life. You have the power to live the way you want to live.
you're gonna send an email out to your whole department telling them that you're trans.
You didn't realize that going on a television show with your girlfriend would make a difference.
The response is gonna be so positive.
Your gift from God is meant for inspiring and encouraging people.
And being honest and brave isn't necessarily just for yourself. It can help other people too.
Dear 7th grade Natalie,
This might sound crazy, but your art is going to resonate with a lot of people.
You will find somebody who loves and accepts you exactly for who you are.
Dear grade 7 Levi,
embrace your sexuality. Don't let anyone else's judgment or opinion of you change who you are.
Dear 7th grade Steph,
you're a lover, Levi, a social butterfly,
Be proud of your roots, your heritage.
an indigenous person, a son, and a big brother.
Your grade 7 Tad.
Be who you are.
You were born to stand out.
You can dress however you want. There are resources available to you that can help you along.
Things are gonna be okay.
You're gonna have so many hurdles to overcome.
But it will be so worth it.
Get involved with your community. Meet other kids like you.
Be who you're meant to be who you want to be, and don't worry about anything else.
Just kick some butt, girl.
You have such a beautiful life waiting for you once you let the world see who you really are.
You're powerful.
Honestly, this video gets me every time, and it gets me at the one specific part, but it really is just such a beautiful display of how challenging coming out can be, but how beautiful it can also be, and the experiences that different queer folks face when they do have to come out and go through what they go through. So again, I really love that video. Hopefully it highlights so many good parts of the coming out process. It really adds a human perspective to it, I find. But yeah, I'm going to pass it to Mon now just to run us through our favorite activity.
Awesome. Yes, it is our favorite activity because we get to hear a little bit about you, and it's also an opportunity for all of you to hear about each other. And so this is the Grateful versus Challenging activity, and the idea is that we all have one thing in our life that we are grateful for, and one thing in our life that we are challenged by or will be challenged by at one point or another. So Jonas and I are going to quickly give you our examples, and then we're going to get a chance to hear from all of you. And so for myself, one thing that I am grateful for is being able to have a safe home here in Canada. I'm so grateful for all the opportunities that I've been able to have. Something that I do find challenging is seeing somebody in my family struggle with addiction. It's definitely something that I don't really talk about a lot, or didn't talk about a lot, because I didn't feel like it was my specific story to share. But through this process at Get Real, I've definitely learned the importance of opening up, not only to let other people know that other families do go through it, but also for myself and being able to speak to people outside of just like my immediate family. I told one of my friends, and she's actually going through something similar as well. So it has given me an ability to be able to have that support system too.
Thanks for sharing that, Mon. I am grateful for a lot of things, but really mostly grateful to be Canadian. I'm a first-gen Canadian on my dad's side, so he and his family came from Egypt, made a lot of sacrifices just so that I could have all the things that I need. So really grateful to be Canadian. Something I am challenged by is lately I've been thinking a lot about, my growing up experiences, not necessarily at school, but mostly just familial. Growing up with a single parent is definitely challenging, and not having those experiences with the other parent for sure was challenging for me. But, really, really, really grateful that my mom is as headstrong as she is and was able to, give us everything that we needed and wanted in life. So really grateful for that.
Thank you so much, Jonas, for sharing. And now it's your opportunity to share a little something with us. So in that Google form, you can open it up and write one thing that you're grateful for and one thing that you're challenged by. None of your answers have to relate to anything that Jonas and I have talked about here today. Please write something that you feel comfortable and unique to yourselves. We are going to be reading just a couple out loud. So you don't have to read or write your name. This is anonymous, so we can't see who or what. So definitely, you can use that link. There's also a Q&A section there. If you have any questions right now, you can definitely ask them, and then we'll answer them at the end. So write one thing you're grateful for, one thing you're challenged by, no names, and just go a little bit in depth into those answers. We'll give you a few minutes to do that, and we'll come right back and read some of them out loud.
Monica, would you be able to put the link to the Google Doc form in the chat for everyone?
Yes, oh wait, this is just for the host and panelist. I just sent it to not everybody. There you go. So that is the Google form right there that you can use.
Wonderful.
All right, we'll give everybody one more minute just because we do have a lot that we want to share with you all, and I don't want to run out of time. So please do your best to answer the questions there. We would love to read some of them aloud. All right, so we'll get started reading some of them. Please, we encourage you all to continue to send them along as well. I'm going to start with one here. Someone said here, one thing that I'm grateful for is supportive friends who I can be my truest self with. Something that I'm challenged by is learning my healthy boundaries is ongoing work.
Really grateful for my health and community. Something I'm challenged by is environmental turmoil.
Something that I am grateful for is supportive family, friends, and coworkers. Something that I'm challenged by is becoming better informed about other people that may be different and that than what I have grown up identifying as.
Grateful for my health. Something I'm challenged by is constant struggles with weight.
This is going to be my last one here just for time's sake. Something that I am grateful for is the strong personal relationships in my life. Something that I'm challenged by is challenged by time, as it is limited resources. I only have so many opportunities to add value, and I want to ensure that I am taking advantage of those opportunities always.
This will be my last one as well. I'm grateful for my family. I grew up in a supportive extended family who were always there for me no matter any issue I had. Something I'm challenged by is I'm so challenged with losing people I love. Several friends, parents, etc. have passed away, and it's difficult to carry on living through the grieving process.
And thank you.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you all so much for sharing that with us. You know, this activity is such a wonderful one to do, even like, you know, to continue doing it throughout the year, because it allows us to hear what other people are going through. I'm not really sure, like, I think you are all within like the same community, but like maybe you don't all see each other every single day. So I think it's important, again, with those racing, I can't, I'm so sorry about that. Wow. It is important for us to be able to hear what other people are going through, because sometimes we get kind of like in this headspace that we're just like doing work, living our life, and we kind of forget about others. And this really brings us back to the understanding that we don't always know what people are going through on the surface, and we can't always tell. So that's why being kind and respectful to every individual can really go a long way to create that welcoming and supportive work environment. And this activity really also allows us to know that we're not alone. And the more that we start to open up and we stop judging one another, the easier it will be to find people who might understand what we are going through. And then I really do, you know, emphasize this when we're speaking with students about reaching out for support. And I want to make sure that I reiterate this here today. I want you all to remember that we don't have to go through things alone. There are resources and support out there for you. We're all really just trying to navigate this world that we're doing for the very first time. We're all just trying to figure it out. And it's just so much easier and better when we have that love, that support, and that respect from one another.
Absolutely. So yeah, I want to say thank you also to all of you for participating in that, just to echo Monica. What we're going to look at now are different identities, assumptions, and terminologies. So we've gone through a little bit of the identities and expressions with reference to the queer community through the gender unicorn slide. But there are so many other points of intersections, and we will go through those that term a little bit more as well. So here we have so many parts of identity that are visible, some are not. Right, so we're going to have, language accessibility, physical abilities, mental health, socioeconomic status. So again, we might not know and or be able to see these things on the surface when we meet a person, when we interact with them. So it leads us to question, why is understanding this or having this, understanding important? And it really creates an awareness of intersectionality. So intersectionality is a really important term. It was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw. Really just highlights that so many, there could be 2 points of intersecting identities that create barriers or create privilege. And so understanding that, your experience is going to be that, different from the next person, even if you can't see that on the surface. So again, just to provide some context, something that I'm well aware of is the fact that I am a passing transgender man. I am half Middle Eastern, but I'm also white passing, so I have that privilege. I also have the privilege of being a passing transgender man, wherein people look at me, they don't know that I'm trans, so I have the privilege of being stealth. So I know that my experiences as a trans man are vastly different than that of a trans woman. A trans woman of color, a two-spirit individual. So really just understanding that it creates and paves way for that privilege for me to spark the change that I need to spark. And so in this next slide, we're just going to see how all of these identities intersect. And I think I'm gonna pass to Monica after I give my intersecting identities as well, because I think hers are so prominent and so amazing to run through. With reference to myself, my intersections are, I intersect with my gender identity. My background is definitely a part of me that I'm starting to get to know a little bit more. Again, raised by my Canadian parent, white passing is definitely challenging. And I also intersect with mental health. So those are my intersections, going to be vastly different from that of the next person, making my experiences just a little bit different.
Yeah, for sure. So it's very important for us to be able to look at, our lives and have an understanding that, some things can create barriers, but a lot of it is also things that create privilege. Like for myself, I am a gay Colombian immigrant raised in Canada, my first language being Spanish, and, being a refugee for a large chunk of my childhood. Those are things created barriers for me, but they also made me very aware of the privilege that I have, especially when I'm going back to Colombia and seeing the different life that I live here compared to the life that I would have in Colombia as a gay woman. Here, I have faced discrimination because of my nationality. I've faced homophobia and sexism, and sometimes, they intersect and happening at the same time. This is where we need to kind of like take out the scope and kind of look at the fact that we don't always experience things in the same way. Something as simple for some people, like walking down the street, holding hands with a partner, is nothing that they think about or have to think about twice. For someone like me, for example, I sometimes have to think about those things. I need to be aware, look around. Am I safe to be able to hold my partner's hand at this moment? And that's not because I'm just assuming, it's because of different experiences that I've had and because of discrimination against LGBTQ plus community. And of course, I really need to be careful and be aware and mindful of my privileges, and in the areas where I am privileged enough, where I can use my voice and not add different barriers for other people, especially, for example, me being a cisgender person, making sure that I'm not adding barriers for my transgender friends, people, folks. So making sure that I use my privilege when I have it. So that's is where intersectionality kind of comes into play. And a big part of that is also our unconscious bias. And this here is the assumptions that we have based on our experiences, our upbringing, social construct, and so many other things. And this quote here really defines it clearly. It says, it's the first thought that goes through your mind is what you have been conditioned to think. What you think next defines who you are. We could definitely start looking into our own biases so that we can become more aware and then unlearn those things. And some examples we have here that are kind of things that really like blew my mind. Like, you know, when you are asking somebody for directions, who do you ask? You know, who do you consider trustworthy? What do those people look like? You know, when you're reading a book, you know, what are those characters that you picture? What do they look like? These are all things based on, you know, what information we've been fed throughout our youth and growing up. And so that's why listening to the voices of other people, opening up, allows us to get more visuality, more, you know, stories and more things to be able to open up our minds and be able to hear those stories and kind of like get rid of those unconscious biases. So here we can look into a little bit of like hiring, you know, preferring a candidate that has certain names or look like us or who have similarities to us. You know, this allows us to fill in the space, you know, of their lives without really knowing anything about them. But we are able to fill that out because we put in ourselves in there. And they're like, oh, okay, you can definitely, you know, be a part of this because, you know, I have a sense of, you know, who you are. But that's, you know, our unconscious biases that we really take for granted every single day. Of course, it doesn't mean that we can't, you know, do anything about them. Looking at these unconscious biases and really recognizing and stopping ourselves and preventing them is really how we're able to educate ourselves and make conscious decisions. So here are some stats that we can look at, and I'm not going to read through all of them, but just looking at the fact that 40% less or 2S LGBTQ plus applicants were 40% less likely to be called for an interview than heterosexual applicants. You know, having 47% of trans people having post-secondary education, and then a vast majority of them earning less than $15,000 a year. These are things that we really need to realize and have our privilege, use our privilege to be able, in our positions, to be able to help and to be able to, you know, navigate into, you know, creating a more inclusive and safe place and equal place for everybody. You know, we obviously don't have the answers, all of them here, but we hope that raising awareness will facilitate, you know, conversation that might lead to that actionable change. We do believe that, you know, the more people know about the different communities, the better we are able to understand and start changing those conscious and unconscious biases that we may have towards certain communities. So how can we address this? You know, acknowledging those unconscious biases, making it a priority to intentionally do the work outside of our comfort zone, you know, only because, you know, it's something that this is what I grew up with. I've never heard this before. That's not a bad thing. You know, taking a chance to really learn those things and being proactive, seeing the opportunities for biases and adjusting them before they really happen, taking a step back and being like, okay, like what are my unconscious biases that I'm putting forward in at this very moment? Like, where do I have to like open up a little bit more? You know, sometimes, you know, there is a big change in someone just stating it, you know, you becoming more aware of it. Like me talking about my story here today, Jonas talking about his story here today will allow you to now have a little bit of accountability to the fact that another human being is, you know, at the end of, you know, me creating this choice or me creating this action. So, you know, that's why listening to each other's voices is so important, because you say like, oh, okay, I've never really thought about it like that since I lived a different life with different privileges. So thank you for, you know, opening up and sharing / like now I can continue on, you know, including that voice that I heard in my everyday.
Absolutely. So with that all being said, I think what would be best is if we ran through a little bit of terminology. We're going to go through a couple slides here, hit some good terms that are good to have in our back pocket, and then maybe get into a little bit of statistics, and then hopefully wrap up in time for some Q&A. So I'm going to pick a couple from this slide here. I'm first going to start with the bottom one. I think that's the most important one for me. Passing is a term described being seen and accepted by society as your identified gender. So like I mentioned earlier, I have that privilege where I pass very well. When I introduce myself to people, I'm not fearful any longer of being misgendered. And I know that that's a huge privilege that I have. Something to keep in mind, though, that's very important is that passing is not the goal always for every trans and non-binary person. So really just knowing that passing as male or passing as female in certain lights can emphasize a really binarized view of gender and how we express our gender. So again, that's not always the goal for every individual. I think two-spirit is a fantastic one to highlight as well. So this is a term used by some Indigenous folks to describe having a combination of both masculine and feminine spirit. It's actually so fascinating. There's a wealth of history behind this that is, I would really strongly encourage all of you to get into. Of course, leaving it up to the education being from Indigenous folks themselves. That would be my biggest suggestion, but this is an identity only Indigenous people can have. So that would be the beginning to that amazing acronym, 2S. And then Monica, you want to pick two from the slide?
I'm actually going to do one just for time's sake, and I'm going to touch on coming out. And I know most of you know what coming out is, but it's something important to note here is that coming out is not something that someone just does once. It's something that some of us have to do on the daily, and something that we can do as individuals to make that easier for others is thinking about the language that we use, because the language that we use really creates that environment that we build. And so something as simple as, you meet somebody new that's coming into work, or maybe you're just having a conversation with somebody that, everyday conversation. Maybe if you're asking if they have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and instead shifting that to, do you have a partner? Do you have a significant other? Right? This can really change someone's comfortability and can really make somebody feel more safe and inclusive in that environment.
Absolutely. So being trans or transgender, I find the short form is really rolls off the tongue nicely. So trans, someone who does not identify with the gender that they were assigned at birth. So please use myself as a placeholder for this one. I was born and assigned female at birth. I did come out, I did transition. So I do identify as being a transgender man. The term below that one, cis or cisgender, means somebody who does identify with that gender assigned at birth. So something that I find is really helpful to remember what this means is the prefix, this term cisgender, CIS, is actually a scientific term to be of alignment. So that means that your gender identity and your sex assigned at birth are aligned, whereas when you're trans, they are not aligned. Why is it important to define both of these and not just one? Because we don't want cisgender to be seen as the default or the norm, the same way we don't want to be looking at heterosexuality as a default or norm for sexual orientation as well. So really important to remember that, and also knowing that the term trans is often used as an umbrella term to refer to many other identities. We have non-binary, two-spirit, genderqueer, gender fluid, etc. So just like I mentioned earlier, when we pop open that umbrella, we're going to have all of these beautiful identities that fall underneath, and also just knowing that as we progress as human beings, so will our language, and we're really just trying to keep up with that. So again, super helpful to remember. This is a slide just that encapsulates what queer looks like, because there's no one way. I think it's a beautiful thing that queer people look any kind of way that they want to, especially even in the trans community. I think it's beautiful that you can, identify, express yourselves in so many different ways. But it really just highlights, there is no one standard way of expression or one way of looking, and it's really important that we be inclusive in all spaces, because we have really no idea who we're sharing that space with, and that's something I'm passionate about, and I know something Monica is passionate about as well.
Yeah, sorry, just to add in here, maybe some people don't know what queer is. So queer is also an umbrella term where like the 2S LGBTQ plus community kind of falls right under that as well. It kind of is a word that you can use. So I can say I'm queer, meaning that I'm not straight. Queer can also mean not cisgender, just to kind of like input that there really quickly.
Yeah, thank you. Amazing. So we want to be aware of microaggressions. So microaggressions are small daily insults and indignities perpetrated against somebody who is part of a marginalized community. They're more than just irritations or annoyances because the cumulative effect of all of these reminders does do psychological damage. And I remember, speaking with a teacher one time, they said, oh, I misgendered a student once and they had such an extreme reaction. I have no idea why. And I said, you know what, it could have been the 10th time it happened that day. And you might just be the scapegoat of their whole day of microaggressions. So we equate these to a bee sting. I think it's a perfect analogy. One sting isn't a big deal, but a handful or more of them daily, yearly, so on, is going to eventually do a lot of damage. So really just being aware that if you do get a reaction, if you do have maybe an interaction with a queer individual that you might maybe think is extreme, maybe think is offside, just remember that, as queer folks, we are constantly battling microaggressions on a day-to-day basis, even if we don't show it and or if it's not seen. So really important to remember that. I think I should pick maybe one. You want to pick one each one?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. Okay, so I think which one I will choose. Okay, so this is one I'm really passionate about. They're all really important, but I like the one that says, I never would have known you look just like a real man or you look just like a real woman. I'll be honest with all of you, this is said to me pretty much every single time somebody finds out that I'm trans, if they're not a queer person themselves. And we understand, or at least I do, I don't want to speak for the community in general, but I understand that it is being said as a term of endearment. It's got good intentions. You look great, you look exactly like how you want to look. But the message received is that, okay, good job fooling everybody into thinking that you're cisgender, making cisgender, the standard, right? Because like I mentioned earlier, passing and looking like a cisgender person is not my goal. I'm not intending to look cisgender. I'm intending to look like Jonas, right? So not wanting to invalidate and or negate that experience.
Yeah, of course. And understanding that every trans person is going to look different, and only because they maybe identify, as like specific genders doesn't mean that they have to express themselves in certain ways. Because like we heard in the gender unicorn, gender identity is completely different from gender expression as well. And then here, the one I'm going to touch on is you don't look gay. Some people may say this when someone comes out to them and they're like, oh, but like, you don't look gay. And just like remembering the fact that, there's no one particular way to look gay, not one particular way to be trans. For me, I remember this took me back to when I was younger and I didn't think I looked gay enough to be gay. So that meant that I wasn't gay. So really, just changing that and really like thinking about it, like, what does gay even look like? Like, what does straight even look like? What does a person even look like? It's just like we all have different things that we are all combined into different layers. And so just really like taking into that. And of course, like if you've asked any of these things before, if you made these comments, like this is just like a learning opportunity. Now you know that, okay, maybe it's not how I intended it to be received. Now I'm going to shift those words and make it different. We all make mistakes. I know I've definitely said things that I've definitely said things before that I'm like, oh, like, why did I say that? But it's about learning and moving forward and not doing it again.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, this slide is not to shame anybody, because we all, like Monica said, I'm sure I've said things that I'm not a big fan of and I'm not proud of either. Before we go into the next slide, I do want to give everybody a little bit of a content warning. We're going to be looking at some statistics, looking at the trans murder rates, looking at the trans mental health, and just really wanting to give everybody a minute to know if you need to turn the camera off, or you need to turn us off for a minute, you need to mute us. Please do take that moment to do so, because we do recognize that the next slide will be a little bit heavy. It's going to be very brief, but what we want to do is we want to highlight the fact that, when these identities do intersect, we have different, different points of experience as a trans person. It can be astronomically difficult. So again, here, I'm not going to read these to you, but there are some statistics here that highlight, how many, trans women of color, trans people in general are, missing, killed, all these things that are really, really, really important to make note of. And it's definitely something that is heavy on my heart. So not wanting to spend too much time on this slide, but really wanting to provide that background that this is the reality for a lot of people in the community. And again, really just helps put that level of compassion and humanness to it.
Yeah, and really also like seeing how like intersectionality has a huge effect on that, seeing that the trans woman or femmes number is way higher than any other. It really does take a look at how like sexism and, colorism and all of this comes into effect here.
Absolutely. So looking at allyship as a verb, putting these into some actionable items, as we like to say here at Get Real. So speaking up in the moment, we're gonna look at different points of allyship. So really quickly, being an ally is to be of support or advocacy to a group of marginalized people that you might not identify with. So again, really quick, Monica is a fantastic ally to the trans community. She herself does not identify within the trans community, but is a huge supporter and a huge advocate through all of the work that she does here with Get Real, and also just being a good friend of mine. So that is a very good example of allyship. So speaking up in the moment, point number one is consider having the conversations that you're having as a rough draft. It might not, and it probably won't be perfect the first time, but it's definitely a start. We like to think that we're not going to hand in, let's say, first day of school, you're not going to hand in a paper that's going to be a 99.9%. It's going to be a rough draft, and then you're going to work and chip away at it. So always being aware of that. You're helping somebody be better, and in turn, collectively helping your team and community be better. It's team building. It builds compassion, puts a layer of humanity between yourselves and your coworkers. Knowing that it's okay to pick your battles sometimes for your own well-being. So advocacy work is a marathon, not a sprint. We have to make sure we're not spreading ourselves too thin. We have to be safe. We have to be cautious and courteous of our own boundaries. And that's something that, Monica and myself are very aware of with the work that we do at Get Real. So remembering to, make some time for yourself when you need to. Visibility, leading by example. You would be so shocked as to, who would be hoping that you would say something or do something. Sometimes people are a little bit nervous, a little bit afraid, and it would just really help if, there was representation, a little bit of visibility. And again, it might shock you how many people were wondering or wanting the same thing. And then that last one there, don't look back and regret not using your voice. Move forward and try your best for the next time. So it's really best case scenario is not dwell on past mistakes, because it doesn't, we can't change it, can't cure it, and it's not going to be different. So might as well set us up for the future.
Yeah, for sure. And we're big, we really believe in the whole, pulling someone in instead of, pulling someone, or I don't remember the phrase. But just like allowing people to like educate, get educated instead of calling them out. That is the word. Instead of calling people in, instead of calling people out. I got it.
You catch more bees with honey, as I like.
Okay, yeah. So, it's just about the ultimate goal in a conversation that you have with somebody who maybe said something that was inappropriate is to educate them. So, just like stepping them aside and being like, hey, like, I don't know if you meant this way, but like, this is how it can like affect another human being. Maybe you can try doing this next time. Something like that. And of course, not everyone is going to be, like willing to learn and being willing to like have that education always. So of course you be kind of like the, you call that, but definitely we want to educate is the number one point of all of this.
Absolutely. So I'm going to very briefly go through this slide, and then we will get some time for a discussion, a little bit of Q&A. So taking time to understand, making sure that unconscious bias is understood. So like Monica ran through with us earlier, knowing that it's there and taking accountability, recognizing that there is unconscious bias is a good place to start, is just acknowledging it. Define diversity, inclusion, and equity and goals for your workspace. So you want to see that transformative change over transactional change, and really asking and having those conversations that may be a little bit more uncomfortable, maybe wanting to lean into that discomfort, but also keeping everybody up to date on federal laws as it pertains to the rights in the workplace. This is a huge piece. Duty to accommodate, the Employment Equity Act, etc., and knowing that that is a very good place to start, and in that everybody's on that same page. Reviewing your policies, including outreach. So who might be missed, overlooked, or deterred from applying? Why would that be a point of reflection potentially for your workplace? Actively seek out diverse candidates, like Monica said earlier. Having a diverse community in a general sense will make your life that much more rich, but imagine how much it can benefit your place of work. So that's a good point to go off of. Review your paperwork. Are there a place for pronouns? Is there a legal name, chosen name, suffix options? Do you ask for the gender? Do you need to, and what options are you providing for this person? So a lot of the time, like, a person who is going to apply to a job, if they see, even on the form, like for example, as a trans person, if I saw on the form, what's your government name, and then what's your chosen name? What are your pronouns, and how would you like to be called? What's your title? That would indicate to me that this is a safe and supportive place that I could actually thrive in, right? So having that visibility also helps. Interview process, so sticking to a script. Neutral questions when interviewing folks helps ensure consistency across the board. So not wanting to, right, like steer away from, or deviate from a universal script. You want to just really stick to, same goes for each applicant. Involving multiple people. This is a huge point too. The hiring process can be a little bit sticky when there's only one person, because there are more potential for that singular person's biases. So having a little bit of support, having somebody to go off of is definitely a better option. And keeping diligent records too, so that you have that available to spot patterns. So if there's an issue that's underlying the application process, there's some hiccups, you can go back and have a paper trail of what that looks like and find that pattern. And then the last one, really important, be prepared. Maybe your questions will be neutral, and an organization should be prepared for all non-neutral questions as well. So this looks like gender affirming benefits, single stall washrooms, support for same gender couples. So again, be prepared for non-neutral questions. Know that they're going to be specific to maybe how that person identifies, how they express themselves, as it is important to them.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also understanding that, like, we know that not everybody has the capacity to make these changes in the workplace, but it's taking a look at what position you're in and how you can make those changes. Sorry, my street is like chaotic today. It has so many noises in the background, and I'm so sorry about that.
Welcome to Toronto.
Welcome to Toronto, yes. So, just like making sure, like, I know like some people might be thinking like, oh, like I can't change that, or I can't change this, but it's like taking a look at like what we said and how you can incorporate it into the position that you are holding. And then so here, it doesn't really stop at the hiring point. It really goes into like the organization itself, and taking a look at like, what causes or organizations does your corporation support? What does the website look like? What is the social media? What are those first client touch points? What messages are you sending? Imagery, is it inclusive imagery? Is just showing representation, really about consulting and actually taking a look into 2S LGBTQ plus customer and employee experiences. And of course, making sure that we're compensating people for their time, not just thinking like, okay, like I want to get the information and then not compensating somebody for it, because that also takes, like a lot of strength and vulnerability and resources for them to, give you that information. So I'm going to jump into the last one here, and making sure, like we love, going to a place and seeing a good flag, like a good pride flag there, because it allows us to feel like welcomed, and we're like, yes, this is awesome. They support us, but making sure that that is the last thing that we put, because, we don't want somebody to come in and then not have all these policies, or have, people calling them the wrong names and all these different things, when they thought that it was going to be an inclusive place. So that's why we know I have that in the last one here, because it's about like analyzing, consulting, providing, uplifting, and then showing that visibility so that we can back it up with the stuff going on inside the workplace as well. So we are running really quite short of time. So I want you all to start off by, sharing your questions now so that we have them here. And we're gonna, while we're waiting, we'll also, kind of like go through one or two scenarios really quickly. So a scenario that we have here is you meet a coworker who looks androgynous and introduces themselves as Alex. You're not sure of their gender identity or what pronouns they use. What do you do? Feel free to write that in the chat. We don't have all the answers, so don't feel like your answer is going to be wrong. We just really want to hear what you have to say, and then we'll, of course, give in our little 2 cents that we have. Fantastic. So somebody said here, ask them how they would like to be addressed and which pronouns works for them. I love that answer so much. Definitely a way to do it is just being like, hey, my name is Monica. Ooh, Danielle, very good. I might introduce myself and provide my pronouns, give them the opportunity to do so as well if they want to. I love that. I was literally just about to say that. So that is perfect. That is the best way to go about it. But something really key to note here is that we shouldn't just be asking that one individual that we are unsure of. It's about making it a general thing to do with everybody, because someone who looks like myself can come in and maybe use they, them pronouns or other pronouns as well. And so making sure that it's just a general thing and not just like asking individuals that we think is very important. So great job. Introduce your own pronouns and ask, them for theirs, their names, the pronouns, and everything like that. I'm going to jump into a question here that somebody asked. Great question, Christina. Somebody asked, do you have any suggestions on how an employer can support trans people who are public facing?
All right, very good question. I think I started talking as I'm muting myself, as I do. So when it comes to supporting a trans person in the workplace, it really is like support for me is going to look different than it will for another trans person, but really asking them if they feel that they have enough support to do what they're doing, if they feel confident, if they feel comfortable, and if they don't, you might ask them what would help make you feel more comfortable. What could I do to make this a little bit easier for you, while not wanting to also put them on the spot, because some trans folks aren't shy being public facing. Some trans folks aren't nervous. Some trans folks are, very confident, happy, and excited, right? So not all the time are you going to find that specific scenario, but just know that it's going to look different for each person. But asking them like, hey, is there anything that I can do to make you feel a little bit more comfortable in a situation, or anything you'd like me to do if we're in a public scenario or public fashion together that I can just keep in the back of my mind. Like oftentimes just checking in, because just knowing everybody's experience is highly subjective. So asking them, is a good start. Not wanting to, again, put them on the spot and assume, because, sometimes, like even with my job, I don't feel like I need even any more support than I already do, because I am a public facing trans person. But there were certain places that I used to work before here that I could have definitely used a little bit of more compassion and maybe asked a few more questions. But yeah, that would be a good place to start. Is just asking like, what do you specifically need from me? How can I make this easier for you?
Yeah, and I think it's also a few things that we could probably do. I mean, like, does everybody have name tags on them with pronouns? This would be cool for somebody who is non-binary, or everybody in general, to be able to feel more included in there. Because I know when I go to a place that has pronouns on them, I'm like, oh my God, fantastic! Like, this is awesome! Like, it's a very inclusive place. Number two would be, is your management trained to understand, what your protocols are in case a customer comes in and, is using inappropriate language and, using things that is going to affect, that trans person. And so being like, okay, so this is what we believe. This is what, the answer would be to somebody like, hey, like we don't use, we're an inclusive environment here. We don't use words like that. And we hope that you can, follow along with the protocols that we hold and the values that we hold in our place of work. Something like that, making sure that everybody in the workplace is kind of like understanding of that, I think is important, like across the board.
Okay, I feel like I'm going to answer, I like this one here. So I have a team member who is from the 2S LGBTQ plus community who always requests everything in writing. Can you explain why, as it is very time consuming? I would assume just having a paper trail of communication and correspondence is what you're pertaining to, and for me, I can understand that in the sense I can understand it's time consuming, but having things in writing solidifies that support for that person if in the event they need it. So a very good example I had was I had a chain of emails and correspondence with my old employer. I used to work for a restaurant and I used to be a chef. I was outed in my place of work and I did want to have a paper trail of what had happened and the interactions that followed afterward. And if in the event I needed to speak to HR, I needed to speak to management. So again, people who are a part of this community might do that for their own protection and also just to have, again, just so it's in writing, it's solid. We want to have those experiences accounted for. And so understanding that it is time consuming, but having it in writing again protects that person for sure.
Yeah, and I think that that's like for everybody, and I think it's also a sense of accessibility for people. And I know that some things that like even doing this workshop, this is time consuming. All of these things are definitely very time consuming, but I think giving people that accessibility to have those things, I think is important to produce. Yeah. Any other question there, Jonas, that you wanted to touch on? I know we actually only have like 4 minutes left. So if anybody here that's listening to us, please send in your questions. We did have, this is kind of like similar to, that statement that I made, if somebody comes in and says like, why do we need to learn about this, about the 2S LGBTQ plus community? It is interesting to know, like, how would you respond to something like that?
Remembering that no answer is a wrong answer. All right, this is a good one here. So anybody on our team could be a member. Yep, very true. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. To make everyone feel welcomed and valued. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think it paves the way for, people in the future who are, part of the community to feel more welcomed and valued as well, if they know that there's this education behind it. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, and of course, yeah, it is very important because we still face discrimination and difficulty getting hired. There's barriers in the workplace and all this stuff. And the more that we know, the better ally we can all be. So it's definitely, getting that education and being able to move forward, including these voices, including, these ideas, and making sure that we know how to interact with people from every type of human being. So I thank you all so much for being here with us today and participating. Here on the screen are our different platforms where you can reach out to us. We have a variety of resources there that you can find for yourself, for your friends, for your family members. But in general, we truly appreciate you all having us in here today and giving us the space to be our true selves and share a little bit about ourselves. And we hope that, it has allowed you to open this communication and conversation in your workplace and hopefully even, in your households.
Thank you so much.
Amazing. That was an amazing presentation. Thank you so much. So I would like to thank everyone for attending today's session. A couple of things to note before we close our session out. A survey will be sent by email along with the recording of the session after the event. So please watch out and let us know what you thought of the session today. And if you're interested in hearing more from our experts and getting more information about the series, it can be found at simcoe.ca/askanexpert. And then I would just like to thank Jonas and Monica for your time and your insights today. They were not only personal and moving, but incredibly informative. And it was very touching to have you speak your stories and share those with us today. So thank you very much for that. And I would like to thank all of our partners involved in making these sessions a success. And I hope that everybody has a fantastic rest of the day and week, and take care and stay safe.
Yes. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
We're
getting lots of love in the chat, so that's wonderful.
I see it. Thanks.
Awesome. Amazing. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.